So this is a video I've been intending to do for quite a little while, and I wanted to give Thunderbird 4 toys some love because there are lots of them in all sorts of different shapes and sizes from various different eras of the series and the films and so on. But of course, what often happens is they become detached from the Thunderbird 2 that they tend to live in. And then it's a question of, okay, well, what Thunderbird 4 is this exactly? Which Thunderbird 2 does it belong to? So if you see someone doing a Thunderbird 4 auction on eBay, how do you figure out whether or not it's the one you're looking for? This video is here to help that problem, which I'm sure some people occasionally have. Anyway, this is the large Thunderbird 2 pod from the Matchbox model. That was the first big Thunderbird 2 that I picked up, and indeed probably the first big Thunderbird 2 you could get in Britain back in the early 90s. So this is what you're looking for this one. It doesn't sort of, in theory it kind of launches out, but it doesn't do, I don't think it really seems to want to do it for me, so I'll just grab it out. For the longest time, I think I had the wrong one in here, but this is the one you're looking for. So, as you can see, it's quite shiny plastic. It's got the little bulldozer attachment here, which it had for clearing underwater rubble. And it also does little, it's very hard to see that, but it has a little effect there for the little demolition missiles to come out the front here. So that's what you're looking for. And I think for the longest time I thought I had the wrong one because it doesn't actually identify itself. There's no markings that I can make out on this at all that say this comes from a Matchbox Thunderbird 2. So in that respect, it's decidedly unhelpful if you do lose it and it becomes unlinked from its Thunderbird 2. But that is the one I believe that you're looking for the large Matchbox Thunderbird 2. Now, this is a much darker green pod, and this comes from the Carlton Thunderbird 2 that came later in the 90s. And as you can see, this one takes a slightly different approach to Thunderbird 4. That probably shouldn't normally just flop down like that, that's just my particular version of it. But as you can see, this is immediately a little bit bigger, but it also differs from the previous version in that it has a dead giveaway because it includes a figure, or should include a figure, I should say. So you should find that it has a tiny, tiny little chap in here in ideal circumstances. Now, it might well be that he's gone the way of all things because he is very, very small. So the odds are it's going to be very difficult for you to find him. But what it does mean is that you get a very detailed cockpit here because there's a lot of sort of detail to be had from this cockpit piece here. So whenever you see a cockpit that opens and that has stickers in it like this, and a clear seat for someone to sit in and drive, that is from a Carlton Thunderbird 2. So this is the Carlton Thunderbird 4. But again, there is very little on the underside. It's got more distinct wheels. This is just intended to roll, but again, there's no markings that I can see there at all that tell you where this one's come from. So as a standalone toy, you're kind of stuck unless you recognise it, which is exactly why I'm doing this video, basically, because I wouldn't have known had I not been looking very, very hard at these and seeing some patterns, basically. So that just slots back on the top there. It should actually be on a hinge in theory. But I mean, it's quite a nice one. I mean, it's well decaled. I mean, if I compare it alongside this one, you can see that they are essentially the same. The main figure is just the main difference rather is just the figure. But the tail fins are slightly different. This is a more sort of straight up tail fin that's got more of an angle to it. But the lines are very similar. So they both picked up the right sort of Thunderbird 4 stylings basically. Now this is the version from the Thunderbirds Are Go animated CGI series, and as you can see, it's not as curved as the the older versions are. This will be, more readily identifiable because it should sort of nominate itself as being from Thunderbirds Are Go rather than just Thunderbirds. But it's got I'm pretty sure there is a way to get this open automatically, but I don't know what it is. So again, standard launch procedure for Thunderbird 4. And as you can see, this one is a slightly different Thunderbird 4. It's different configuration. It's longer than the original series version. It's unusual in the sense that in this series, the pods in Thunderbird 2 were generally modular. So they were created out of various different parts that you could bolt together. And that actually happened in the series. But Thunderbird 4 remained its own distinct craft in one piece. So it's unusual in that sense for the series as a whole. But you can see it's a lot sort of sleeker looking. It's got more of a sort of snub nose to it. And this one actually does have some detailing on the bottom about who made it. And this has got ITV Studios on it as a copyright. And can't quite read the rest of it. Something Pictures. But basically it's also got it's got some little opening doors in the back as a play feature as well. So it's doing quite well compared to some of the other Thunderbird 4s, and it's if I compare it with the Carlton one, you can see that it's not quite as long, but it's just that different body shape, and yet you can see the actual the fins and things are not dissimilar. So I liked the show because it kept them very, very similar style wise, and yet modernised them at the same time. So fair dues to them. You can see even the sort of the designs of the thrusters there, and the fins and the lines are the same. So it's all very, very cleverly done. Now, I'm right. Yes. So this one's. Do you know what? Until I tried that, I really didn't know that it did it. But like its Carlton predecessor, there is actually a figure inside this Thunderbird 4, and I seriously didn't know until I actually just tried that on the off chance that it did actually open up. So you will find in there a very, very, very small. Now the interesting thing, the reason I wasn't expecting that to work is that there are much bigger action figures for this range which would not fit in here. So I didn't realise that would actually be a thing, but he is in there. So that's really good. So I know that now. And that would explain the size of action figures. There's obviously a sort of more of a micro scale range of action figures that go inside the bigger Thunderbirds Are Go ships. So that makes perfect sense. Now, these are all the big sized Thunderbird 2, Thunderbird 4s. That's as many as I can think of. But I am going to show you some more now. So having shown you the large scale pods, I'm going to go to the small scale pods now, of which there are many. In fact, many more than there are larger ones. This is where it starts getting really confusing. But this is the small scale pod, as you can probably immediately tell from the Thunderbirds Are Go animated series. So I'm going to go backwards in time again now. You can see it's actually smaller than the Thunderbird 4 from that version of Thunderbird 2, that's the large scale Thunderbird 2 size. So that will immediately give you an idea of how small the Thunderbird 4 is going to be. So we pop open the little ramp there, and this is the Thunderbird 4 from the Thunderbirds Are Go small scale toy. And that is the big one. Now, interestingly, of course, because they're probably from the same design spec, they are remarkably similar. And this is where I tend to run into problems with things like this on eBay, because if someone just takes that picture, there's very little to actually differentiate this one from this one if that one's taken close up. So if I put this closer up, you see, they're really not going to be that radically different at the end of the day. This is the irony of it. Because they're coming from the same basic design, so actually they're very, very hard to tell apart. So the only way you are going to know is by virtue of seeing them up against something else as a comparison, or indeed, of course, asking the question, do you know how big it is, relative to anything else? So I'm just fishing in my pocket to see if I've got anything that's helpful. So that's a £2 coin. And that is basically how big the little Thunderbird 4 is from Thunderbirds Are Go. So that'll give you an idea. I was laughing the other day actually because I had lost this. Well, I say I'd lost it, my son might have lost it, but it actually turned up in amongst Power Rangers Zords. So go figure. But it was good timing because it allowed me to carry on and do this. So moving on. Now this one is an interesting one because I didn't show you a large variant of this one because there isn't one. This is the quite recent Corgi reproduction of Thunderbird 2 and Thunderbird 4, which is actually very close to the Matchbox small version of Thunderbird 2 and Thunderbird 4. That's probably the nearest exemplar of it. And again, I've looked at these in previous videos, but this is what the Corgi version looks like. And you'll be forgiven for not being able to spot a difference between it and the original small one. And indeed, this Thunderbird 4, if it didn't have a nice big Corgi sign on the bottom of it, which is deeply helpful, because if you didn't have some indication, as I've already shown you, a lot of these Thunderbird 4s do not state who the manufacturer is because they come as part of another toy, effectively. So they don't bother, which I guess is probably a bit of a loophole in terms of what they were supposed to do. But this is actually die cast. So it's not plastic, so it's immediately different because you won't be able to tell that on an auction. So if you want to do another £2 coin size comparison, there it is. So I mean, all of these that come out of the smaller Thunderbird 2 pods are not massive in any way, shape or form. So they are very, very difficult to distinguish. But as you can see, this is the classic sort of version of Thunderbird 4 rather than the more streamlined modern version. And it does say Corgi on it. So anyone half worth their salt should be able to say, yes, that's a Corgi Thunderbird 4. Now, I just had a bit of a chuckle with this one to myself because this comes from the small Carlton Thunderbird 2. You can tell by the colour of the pod, it's very dark green for this one. But I was humming and hawing to myself over which Thunderbird 4 actually belonged to it. And I think it's this one, because the Carltons tend to be fairly plasticky. And this wasn't actually with it, but it was on the shelf that I keep other Thunderbird and Jerry Anderson items with. So I think this is it. Once more, like the other Carlton one, it doesn't identify where it's from on the underside of the Thunderbird 4, which is deeply unhelpful, as I've already noted. But it's all in one piece. It's got a sort of a dark screen on it. So I think that's the right one. It seems to fit very, very well in terms of it going back inside its pod there. And it's the right little sort of length, the right sort of scale for this particular pod. So I think that is the right one for that one. The other one I was looking at for it is actually, I think, a much more modern one. And I'm going to track down its origins now before I come back to you on it. So I'll leave you there for now. So remember a while ago, I showed you the Corgi Thunderbird 2, Thunderbird 4 pairing. This is the Matchbox Thunderbird 2 pod, which I think is very, very close to the more modern Corgi recreation. Nice 4 on the door there, which is always nice to see. And here again, we, as per Corgi's version of it, we have a die-cast Thunderbird 4. And helpfully, this one does say, it's very sort of hollow interior, that it is from 1992, which places it quite nicely because the only one that was produced in 1992 was the Matchbox. That's the Matchbox one's era. It's hard to make out on the camera, I know, but you might have to take my word for that one, that is what it says on the inside there. So it's basically, it says ITC, I think, on it, but that is Matchbox ITC with the licensors at that point, I believe. So that's that one. And now we go a long way back, because this is a dinky blue-coloured Thunderbird 2 pod. But even back then, even with that dinky version, it came with, that's a replacement door, so ignore that door colour. It came with a little teeny tiny, if I can get it out, it is in there, it's definitely in there. It came with this little dinky, so to speak, Thunderbird 4. Now, that is quite unusual. I am hoping that's the right one, because I half expected that to be metal, but in fact it's just a little plastic. Now, I hope that isn't one that somebody's just sort of dropped in there as a replacement, but I've never seen that anywhere else. So I'm hoping that that is what they chose to use as a Thunderbird 4, and it is definitely the right scale for the opening to the pod door. So I'm thinking that's probably it. But this is, audience participation. If you can tell me in the comments if that's not the right one, then please do so, because that is the only Thunderbird 4 I've got that would probably stand a chance of fitting in there. But I know that this one has obviously had some work done to it, because I know that door isn't the original door. So it's possible that somebody did a 3D print or something. I don't know. But I'd say let me know in the comments if you know better than I do. Now, I know for the fact this is. I'm going to come on to a slightly different one now, which is. I'm just going to show you this one first. This one I really love. This one didn't come in a pod. This is the Tomica Thunderbird 4, which is a Japanese die-cast release, which came out with the Thunderbirds Are Go animated series. So you could buy these in the shops here in the UK. And they did some other ones as well as some of the other ships. But I really like this because the level of detailing is exactly what you would expect from a Japanese manufacturer taking things seriously. And yet it's like as you can see from the size of my fingers, it's a tiny little thing, really. And yet it's got some real heft to it. Let's try the £2 coin example again. So as you can see, that's quite sizable compared to some of the other smaller Thunderbird 4s. And I'll put that's the sort of supersized Thunderbird 4 from the Thunderbirds Are Go pod in there. So, it's obviously it's still a lot smaller than the supersized version, but it's not as tiny as the other version at all, and that is very solid die cast, so you're not going to get that confused with anything else. And the level of detailing, the sort of surface detail, the greebling and so on is much better than you'd expect from one of its sort of plasticky counterparts. So I really like that, because I really love things like the old Star Wars die casts that you can get, because they last forever. So I just wanted to show you that one. This is another one that you might see, although not for very long. It's a classic little pullback one. I've actually got this one carded, but I just thought I'd show you this little version. This was a Bandai release, actually. Bandai do get involved with the Thunderbird's toys for sort of international licensing purposes and so on from time to time. And I'm going to segue seamlessly into another Bandai release. So this one you may not be as familiar with. This is Thunderbird 4 from the Thunderbirds movie from 2004. And I believe this is Bandai, although I think there were some other versions of this, but I haven't been as sort of diligent in terms of chasing those other ones down. I think I nearly got hold of a bigger one once, but there was some confusion with myself and the seller, and it just didn't come off in the end. But as you can see, this version, if you ever see it, is decidedly different from both the Thunderbirds Are Go and the original Thunderbirds series version of Thunderbird 4. It's quite nice. It's quite funky as they go. It's got the same basic, obviously, yellow idea, and it's got twin thrusters at the back. They've got little wheels on it. That's it. But the Thunderbird 2 approach was slightly different in that film as well. So I've got that as a pack with some other mini vehicles as well that sort of fit into the bigger Thunderbird 2, which has several pods rather than just a pod. But I just thought I'd show you that one for completion. Now, this one I'm not sure about. and again, you might be able to help me in the comments here. This is Carlton era, but as far as I know, this isn't the official Carlton era pod, nor is it a pullback. It has wheels, but it's not a pullback. What it does do is have this little action. So you press a button on its top, and the thrusters pop out a little bit further, and that's it. So again, that's a bit of a sort of a curious one, because it's definitely not the Carlton one that goes with the pod, I don't think, because otherwise it would have room for an action figure in it, and it doesn't. So I think this was just another version of Thunderbird 4 that they released. You notice it's got the slope on the fin as well, so that which tends to mark it out as a a version that Carlton's done. So I just throw that one in for interest, as I do this one. And again, this one has copyright of Carlton on it, and it is an original version of Thunderbird 4, but just a little vinyl version of it. So I don't quite know where this originated from, unless it was just on a sort of a blister card kind of thing with maybe a small Thunderbird 2 or other pod vehicles. I haven't seen one carded. I just had a quick look, and there are other examples of it around, but nobody else seems to be able to pin it down to a particular version of Thunderbird 2 or anything similar to it like that. So I'm not quite sure about this one. So again, if anyone's got any clues about where this one might have originated from, do let me know. It doesn't seem to be a sort of De Agostini one or anything like that I can immediately identify. Now, there are, of course, many other variants of Thunderbird 4 out there. The very early JR21 models will also have different versions of it, that you can find, although they're relatively rare, I believe, to get hold of. But you can have a whole squadron of Thunderbird 4s of various shapes and sizes from various different eras. And it was funny, because I was just thinking to myself that Thunderbird collecting seems like quite a finite thing to do, because you've only got 5 core vehicles effectively. But then of course you think about the pods, you think about the different scales they've all been released in over a long period of time, and all of a sudden it's not perhaps quite such a limited thing as you might realise. So there's just some of the Thunderbird 4 family for you to have a look at. And with that bombshell, I shall leave you there. Please like and subscribe. Cheers for now.